Hello, my name is Paul Glumaz, and I am an activist with the political movement of Lyndon LaRouche, and this is being brought to you by General Welfare Presents. Today is June 7th, 2017. I'll start with a personal anecdote. Last night, I met with three of the candidates who are running for the vacated seat in the 46th legislative district of the Washington State. It happens to be the district that I live in, and I am a precinct committee officer in that district of the Democratic Party, and they're going to be choosing the King County Council will be choosing from a list of three people presented to them by the district. Will be choosing the state representative, the new state representative. So what I told these people is that, unbeknownst to most Americans, and unbeknownst perhaps even to them, that there is a profound change taking place that will impact them in the most profound way. And they asked me what that was. And I said, it was what emerged on May 14th and 15th in China with the summit on the One Belt, One Road. And that this is the infrastructure transformation of the planet that is now going on. And that following that, you had Trump tell NATO and the Arab states that terrorism is the issue, not removing Assad in Syria, not going after Russia. Russia's not the greatest threat. And then following that, Trump took out the climate change. He took the United States out of the Paris Accords on the climate change. And then following that, there was a incredible three-day conference in St. Petersburg Economic Forum, where 300 U.S. business representatives were there, 1,000 Chinese business representatives were there. The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi was there, and huge developments were going on. And Putin got a chance to meet Megyn Kelly, the individual that Trump made some bloody references to. Anyhow, but the reality is that a new world is shaping up, and it's okay if the United States disintegrates, if the rest of the world disintegrates, and if nations disintegrate, and we head towards a small is beautiful, lowered population, post-industrial society, where nations break up and we are no longer oriented towards economic progress, or no longer oriented towards science and technology. We just learn to exist within a fixed order. That reality, that orientation, which has been governing U.S. policy increasingly in the last 40 years, has now come up against the reality that that's not going to be the future. All our entertainment industry is geared towards some post-apocalyptic world. We live in total fear of nuclear war. We live in fear of terrorism. We live in fear of crime. We live in fear of Mother Nature, taking care of our excess population because we're overpopulating. We live in fear of, and you've had 150 years of Russophobia that has been programmed into the U.S. population. You have another 70 years of anti-communism that has been programmed into the population. You have probably another, since 9/11, you probably have another 16 years of anti-Muslim that has been programmed into the population. So you got all these programs that are being activated in the population as the reality of the change that's now going on in the world is starting to barely become apparent to the people of this country and to the leadership and to what have you. So I discussed this with all these candidates. And what's important is they didn't really know any of this. And, it's not their fault, but it is the case that this reality needs to get out to the U.S. population. Because without doing that, we're not going to be able to break through the pessimism and the cynicism that exists in the population that's been built in over these 40 years. You can't build infrastructure anymore. You can't protect your kids anymore from becoming drug addicts. You can't even protect your children. You have to protect your children from abusers. You have a world that's totally different than what it was, at least in that sense, than what it was 50 years ago. And people are very pessimistic. Their elected representatives are very pessimistic. The congressmen are very pessimistic. You have an entirely pessimistic society that doesn't believe you can get anything done. And you have a financial system which isn't going to let you do anything because they need the bailouts, they need the credit. Unless you're going to make a profit on something, they don't want to invest in it. And the government is forbidden from doing what it used to do in the past, which is to create the financial mechanism to build the infrastructure. I mean, that's how FDR did it. He didn't do it with private money. They didn't build the infrastructure with private money. They did it with state credit through the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. We could do the same. So here's the whole point. Now that the world's changing, it does matter whether the U.S. disintegrates or not. It matters to the people running things, because if the U.S. was going to disintegrate and the world was going to disintegrate with it, then there's no problem. The better people climb to the top of the heap, and those that don't make it, well, that's God's way of taking care of your, the survival of the fittest. So in the future of 2 to 3 billion people, or 1 to 2 billion people, the ones who make it are the more capable, and we're destined to make it. And why should we be putting money into health care for poor people? I mean, they're not going to make it into when the system disintegrates, as it continues to disintegrate. They're going to die. Or maybe we're going to be able to put them to work in concentration camps first, before they die. That's the mentality you're dealing with Wall Street and the City of London. These $100 million bonus CEOs are looking at your welfare and your Medicare costs, and they're saying, whoa, that's our money, not yours. That's our money. We deserve it, you don't, because you guys you're not worth it, because you're not able to fight and climb the social ladder and the ladder of success. You're now able to claw your way up, and therefore you don't deserve anything. So that's the mentality we're dealing with. But now everything's shifting, because the Chinese are saying, we're going to pull everybody out of poverty. There isn't going to be a poor class anymore on a global scale. With the Chinese intervention, Africa is the most rapid rate of growth area and economic development right now. Of course, they're coming from relatively little, but they're moving very fast now with the help of the Chinese and the building of the infrastructure there. So now we have a different world. Now, what are you going to do with the people who've brought themselves up and conditioned themselves to the world that we were going into, which we're no longer going into? What happens to them? Where do they go? What about your politicians that are preaching, shut down nuclear power, shut down oil, shut down your your hydroelectric plants. You know, go to solar and windmill, which can't support a darn thing. Well, you're going to kill people if you do that. Well, what's wrong with that? Isn't the world overpopulated? Or aren't we going to all drown because the water levels are rising? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you have this incredible, in every area of society, in every area, you have a crisis now beginning to occur between what is now emerging in the future and what is lingering in the current situation in the paradigms of the population. You have different paradigms, but they're all negative. They're all anti-development. They're all whether it's liberal anti-development or conservative anti-development. We're going to build infrastructure, all right. We're going to have private-public partnerships where there's going to be a 10% return, and you got to pay us off in 10 years. So we'll build your rail, but how are you going to pay us back? Well, we're going to have to put some kind of tax on it, or we're going to have to sell some other public utilities and make people pay more for it. How are you going to pay for all of this? Okay, now I'm going to take you back now to 1980, I believe 81. At that time, Lyndon LaRouche was doing a back channel for the Reagan administration with the Soviet Union, and they were discussing breaking out of the Cold War by having the U.S. and the Soviet Union jointly develop the technologies to knock out missiles. And the designated ambassador or diplomat who was meeting with LaRouche said to LaRouche, look, if Ronald Reagan goes with your proposal, the Soviet Union leadership will reject that proposal. And Lynn said to this ambassador, diplomat, he said, if you do that, the Soviet Union will collapse in 5 years. Well, the Soviet Union collapsed in 6 years. Well, what collapsed the Soviet Union? Was it, people got tired of communism? What collapsed the Soviet Union? It was the collapse of the infrastructure. Because the Soviet Union did not invest in upgrading or maintaining their existing infrastructure. They used their existing infrastructure to try to have a first strike war-winning capability in a nuclear confrontation, potential nuclear war with the United States, and they deployed. Their infrastructure collapsed. That's why they collapsed. Now, right now, that is exactly what's happening in the United States. In New York City, there's a beginnings of a collapse of infrastructure that threatens to turn the whole city into chaos. Primarily, the tunnels between Manhattan and New Jersey are an example. The subway system is another example, and the problems of Penn Central Station is another example. But all these things have to be dealt with. You have the locks on the rivers in the Midwest and on the Mississippi that are need to be replaced. And it's getting to the point where you're going to have a total crisis, just like you had the crisis in on the Oroville Dam spillway in California, where they were 1/2 an hour from having Sacramento underwater. That's how serious it is. And how you going to upgrade and rebuild your infrastructure? On private-public partnerships? No. How are you going to do it? Well, you have to implement GlassSteagall, and you have to create public credit. You have to create actual government credit to finance it. And that government credit enters into the economy as actual money, and it stays in the economy as actual money in circulation. That's what you have to do. That's what the Chinese do. That's what Lincoln did. That's what FDR did. That's what you have to do. And none of these Republicans understand that. Some of the Democrats do, but none of the Republicans do, or maybe a couple do. So now you have this fight going on in Congress with the bill that the Republicans have introduced to end Dodd-Frank and replace it with their version, and that bill is just insane. It just no regulations on the banks, just more derivatives, more expansion, more bailouts, and the other is the Glass-Steagall resolution of Marcy Kaptur and Walter Jones, and so there is now an attempt to put the Glass-Steagall resolution on as an amendment to the Republican bill and force a debate on the issue in the Congress. And I don't know if that has been done or not, but there was a hearing on whether it was germane to put the Glass-Steagall resolution onto the Republican bank reform bill, which is a disaster beyond belief. So you have this kind of thing going on, but the key thing right now is that you're going to have to rebuild the infrastructure of the United States. Now, any modern civilization requires 50% of the economic activity has to go to maintain the infrastructure and upgrade the infrastructure. Those roads have to be continually repaired. The tracks have to be continually repaired. And when they get to be too old, you have to leapfrog to a more advanced technology, like high-speed rail. If you don't do that, you do not. It will come back to you, just like the Soviet Union. It will come back to you. This is what's happening to the United States now, and we come to that point. Now you're going to have a president organize the Congress to get a Glass-Steagall resolution through and to create the public credit to be able to launch an infrastructure, or complete infrastructure, connecting up, and you have to have a plan, an integrated plan for the nation. You can't just have 50 projects for $1 trillion. You need 500 projects, but it has to be integrated. 1 trillion. No, you need 10. You need $10 trillion equivalent in infrastructure, and that'll put a lot of people to work. But more importantly, it'll transform the physical economy, because the economy we're going into is more interconnected, and delays in transportation are becoming more costly than the actual production process itself. You delay the delivery of a good, you actually disrupt the productive process. You actually increase the cost dramatically. And that's key. If the difference between 10 days and 2 days is huge in the productive process. And that's what has to happen to the United States. The United States has to dramatically change. And these people that I was talking to last night, they were all decent people. They represented different types of orientations. One candidate was totally oriented to getting women into politics and sexual issues and gender issues, but she was in support of Glass-Steagall and things like that. But that was her orientation. And when I brought up to her and her grouping about it all, and after I got past the whole LaRouche issue and brought it up, they listened. They began to get a sense. And one older lady there said, "Well, how do you know what you know? I mean, how do you know that this transformation is coming? How do you know that even China is doing this?" And it just goes to show you that what the media has done, which is completely obscured what is going on. And the only thing going on right now is Trump, Russia, and God knows what else will be coming after that. So, and then in another meeting, I got a chance to go into this more detail with somebody. And in another meeting, I listened to these people talk about how nuclear power has to be dismantled, and how how we have to become more environmentally conscious, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the other big discussion was on increasing the marijuana, defending marijuana legalization, and then there was one woman who wanted to shut down all the dams and all of the nuclear power plants and just go strictly solar and windmill. And she had a whole thing on that, and so it was kind of, it was kind of a different paradigm. It was a very different paradigm, and so that's the kind of thing that you're dealing with in some elements of the population. But the big problem you have is understanding that the world has changed. As of May 14th and 15th, the U.S. is no longer the hegemon. We have entered a multipolar world, not a unipolar world anymore. And everything has to change. Everything has to be rethought through. Terrorism is no longer going to work because the purpose of terrorism is to destroy nations, and that's no longer the policy that's now taking over the planet. It's not to destroy nations, it's to build nations up. So you don't want to have terrorism running all over the place. Up to now, terrorism has been an instrument of the Bush and Obama administration, as well as the British and the French neo-colonial elements in their war to keep their supremacy. The supremacy of the Atlantic Alliance, of NATO, of London and Wall Street financial system. Terrorism has been a key aspect of this. Same as the drug trade. But now, if you're going to have these kind of developments that are not coming out of the One Belt, One Road, well, then you're going to have to shut down the drug trade also. You're going to have to do all these things because you're in a different directionality. You're in a different paradigm. You're in a different policy orientation. But almost all Americans have no clue that this is the reality. Some are starting to get the clue, and our job is to expand and make sure that more and more people have a sense of this. Because you can't really do anything politically in the United States if you're not in the real world. And the real world is no longer the new dark ages to become, but it's the massive industrialization of the planet, going into space, developing fusion. That's the future. And that's a good future. But nobody's going to get excited in the U.S. about it because they've been completely, no one's getting that excited about it because they've been completely programmed into the pessimism and the cynicism of the paradigm that says, human beings are headed down the tubes. The problem is overpopulation. That's why we're having all these problems and so on and so forth. Mother Nature's going to take care of us, If God, and the other group says God's going to take care of us, so God's going to strike us down because we're bad, and the other says Mother Nature's going to strike us down because we're bad. So I mean, that's a different paradigm.